Hello, I'm Paul Hinault for Simsbury Community Media, and today it's my pleasure to interview Matt Curtis, Superintendent of Schools for the town of Simsbury. Matt, we're actually in Matt's office doing a remote shoot today, which is one thing that I really like doing. But before we introduce Matt, let me give you a little background. Matt's in his 13th year as Superintendent of Schools for the town of Simsbury. Prior to that, he was in Glastonbury as Assistant Superintendent of Schools for that town. But even before that, he was here in Simsbury as Assistant Principal at Squadron Line School, then the Principal of Squadron Line School, and then he became Director of Human Resources for the town school system. But let me also tell you that he has a BA in philosophy from the University of Hartford, where he was a start on the basketball team along with Vinnie Baker, who's now assistant coach for the Milwaukee Bucks after a very successful NBA career. Matt also has a MA from Central Connecticut State University in elementary ed. He also has a master's, a sixth year from the University of Connecticut in elementary leadership, or school leadership, I think it's what it's called these days. So that's good. So Matt, welcome. Glad to have you with us today.
It's great to be here.
We're going to talk about a number of subjects, but why don't we talk about the first one, which is the Latimer Lane renovation. I think that's great. A lot of people went through that on Saturday. Why don't you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. So really something to celebrate, I think, for the school community and the community at large. You know, it's a project we've worked on as an entire community for 5 to 7 years, and getting it through referendum, a tremendous amount of support. But most recently, we had a ribbon cutting at the completion of the project. And as a superintendent, I got to tell you, it was one of those moments that made you feel really good because it was representative of all the different groups that worked on a successful project that benefited the community. You had Board of Finance members there, Board of Selectmen members. Certainly we had our Board of Education there. We had parent representation. All our administrators came out. Really nice event to kind of open up. And then we actually held the Board of Education meeting there that evening in the beautiful new gymnasium. And Mike Lazzetti and my Assistant Superintendent, Neil Sullivan, held an open house along with some of the students at Latimer Lane on that Saturday, which drew almost 600 people. So community members very interested in coming through, and like I had said publicly before, a project that will benefit the entire community for many years to come.
That's great. Matt, how many square feet was that renovation?
The new space was about 22,000 square feet.
Wow, at a cost of roughly what?
Overall, $39 million was the total cost of the project. Included touching every classroom, new educational wing, beautiful new gymnasium, media center as well. So
that's awesome.
Complete overhaul.
Right, right. And we got state reimbursement from that as well.
We did about 35% of the project, I believe, is reimbursed.
Excellent, excellent. Well, that's great. And 2 years, it's done, and now we're off. So
we're off and moving, talking about the next one.
We'll talk a little bit about that a little bit later. So tell me a little bit about what are some of the challenges that a superintendent of schools faces, both in Simsbury and nationwide.
Yeah, locally, when we think about the work of the superintendency here or the school district here, I think we're really fortunate. We have supportive parents, supportive boards, really great kids and families to work with. I think our local challenges, I kind of put it in two buckets, right? There's a financial bucket and there's a programmatic bucket, and they both play off of each other. And by financial, I don't mean that we don't get financial support. There's just long-term, I think, capital projects, both on the town side, not to speak for the town, and the school system side, that we need to continue to find innovative ways to get ahead of so that we're not in tough shape and chasing things from behind. That's a local challenge, and I think when I talk about that financial bucket, I think it's the responsibility everybody feels of how to continue to have a world-class school system, do it in the most responsible way you can when we recognize we're in a wonderful community that does have a higher mill rate, and that puts stresses on taxpayers as well. In Connecticut, we have that unique system of the school system is paid for primarily through tax revenue of homeowners.
Yeah, yeah. Well, one of the challenges I think you also face are things that most school districts have is, what do you do about aging buildings, okay? What do you do about security? What do you do in today's world about, disruptions in class, like from cell phones? We'll talk a little bit about that later, but, those are some of the things I think that everybody faces.
Yeah. I would say, the other piece you asked about is, the national issues or the more broader issues. And, education right now is kind of an industry in distress. I think
Right.
when you read about it, you hear about it on the news. Certainly the voice of the educators talks a lot about teacher burnout, the sustainability of the profession, the volatility of people moving around, the ability of school districts to continue to recruit and maintain significant talent. You look at how education has changed over time and the workplace has changed over time. We lag, right? We lag behind what's going on in the workplace with flexible schedules, flexible work hours. So an industry or a profession that used to be attractive due to the schedule is now kind of one of the few industries that's time bound. So I think we have to continue to think about that in our efforts to get quality people to stay with us, meet their needs, and continue to meet the needs of the kids. So that's a biggie.
That's a real biggie. Well, let's talk a little bit about the school budget. Simsbury has 5 elementary schools, junior high school, and the high school. You've got a budget of roughly $86 million. You have 660 full-time employees. So that's a pretty big operation. So let's talk a little bit about that from the standpoint of what's coming up for next year. You're just probably starting the budgeting process, both for operating and for capital. Let's talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, so we'll kind of formally kick our process off with what we call in the community, and you're familiar with the tri-board meeting.
Right.
So we'll put out there information relative to kind of what our starting costs are, what are our fixed costs of the operation, and of that $85 million, which, as you said, is pretty sizable operation. 80% of that number represents salary and benefits. So when you really think, and most of those salaries being, negotiated labor contracts. So when you think about the flex zone of those dollars and where you can really make an impact to cost contain, it's not a significant piece of that puzzle. And we do know that with the reval of 2 years ago and last year's budget increases, there's certainly some local strain on the mill rate. And I know that we'll be talking about that at the Board of Finance. And what we do at that meeting is kind of talk about parameters and guidance and guidelines and go back and do our best collectively to, as a school system, put forward a budget that is representative of what you felt your leaders and your administrative team and your teachers need to maintain and continue our excellence and be responsive to what the overall challenges financially of the community are. So that's kind of step one. As you said, capital or our building infrastructure is another part of that. We work on what we call a 6-year plan. Really, we focus on the first year up in that. We don't have a significant amount of capital requests this year, so hopefully that'll help us with a little flexibility on the operating side, but we'll have to see where that goes.
Yeah, okay. Now, there's roughly, 4,100 students in the school system?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
All right. And how does that compare from past years, or where do you think it's going to go in the future?
Yeah, so we're in what I would say, we just received our projections. We do those on an annual basis. We're in an area now where we're seeing relatively flat enrollment. I think we'll probably continue that for the next 5 years or so. When we looked back, right around that post-COVID period, the projections were showing us that we'd see some pretty significant growth at the elementary level. We've seen some of that, not quite as significant as they thought. And I think due to kind of housing availability, home prices, I think we'll see our enrollment stabilize over the next 5 years. That's helpful from a cost containment standpoint, because our largest driver obviously is the number of teachers you need to facilitate the learning with the students. So that number should be relatively stable, which is a good starting point for us.
Right. Okay. Well, one of the things that, even though the enrollment might be stable, is the impact of special education, as well as out-of-district, what they call out-of-district enrollments. And that seems to be going at a disproportional rate to the rate of student
Growth of overall enrollment.
So how does that impact your budget? How do you handle that?
Yeah, fair point. I think, coming out of COVID and even pre-COVID, we're seeing students with more complex needs. And certainly it's our desire and our responsibility to figure out the best way to program for those students. But to your point, from just a straight enrollment standpoint, both at the local level and the state level, districts have seen an increase in the percentage of students that require special education services, or what we call an individualized education plan. So our overall percentage of our students is about 17.5%. If you went back probably a decade, probably 11 or 12%.
Yeah.
So some pretty significant growth.
Right, significant growth. Yeah.
So it doesn't run on the same curve as the overall enrollment. It has increased. And with that does come increased costs, because you do require more services, related services, and teachers for those students. You mentioned what we call out-of-district placements. There are some level of services that you cannot provide in a district, and we provide those at outside approved facilities, some in the state of Connecticut, some beyond. One of the challenges we've seen there is there has been growth, Paul, in that student population, but those are businesses, right? Those are independent businesses that have increased their tuition costs.
Right.
So an overall example to give you on that's pretty simple is we were running a deficit 2 years ago in that out-of-district line item of about $500,000. Conversations with the Board of Finance, these are legally required services, very supportive in aligning that through the budget process and right-sizing that line item. Next year, same number of students, prices increase on the outside from a tuition standpoint by almost 20%.
Wow, it's a big
jump. That gives you about the same number again, and at the same time, because needs have increased in the state of Connecticut, the reimbursement we get back from the state decreased.
Yeah.
So your costs increase, your reimbursement decreases, and one of the challenges of being a public school system is we're not a revenue generator. So
Right.
I don't have a natural way
You can't go anywhere
to offset that in the course.
Right.
So I think that is a significant challenge that
And there's
not
no
only
help coming
Simsbury
from the
has
state.
seen.
There's no help coming from the state legislature either to increase that.
From a legislative standpoint, they have X number of dollars that they can distribute, and they distribute it on needs, and it fluctuates over time. Certainly, superintendent's group and our local legislators have advocated for what they call another look at the excess cost reimbursement, which is the reimbursement back from the state. It's a top priority. You want to stay hopeful on that, but again, it's a challenge everywhere. So I think districts are looking for more innovative ways to provide more comprehensive programming in-house,
Right.
rather than have to send students out of district.
Yeah, yeah. And we also have not as many as we had during COVID, but you also have about 35, 36 students that are homeschooled.
Correct.
I think at the height of COVID, it was around 40, 46, 47, somewhere around there. So that is also, you still have to provide some services, I believe, to them as well.
Not
as
really on the
much,
homeschool students. They
Yeah.
they sign kind of an affidavit of kind of what their program is and what they're doing, and
Okay.
they have the responsibility and the right to educate those childs based on that program.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, all right, good. Well, that wasn't something I wasn't clear on. So, okay, so for next year, the budget, you're already working on that. You're working with Board of Finance. You're working with the town, with the unions. You've already got your contract in place that I think runs till 2026.
Correct. Yep.
So that's all in place. Okay. So let's talk about some of the things regarding academic achievement.
Sure.
Simsbury's always been very high in academic achievement, and I don't think that's really changed. Why don't you give us a few highlights?
Sure. We're proud of the way our students perform, right? And our teachers prepare our kids. And like I said before, we're fortunate at how families support. So we did have a pretty positive year. Overall, when you look at some of the markers that the state reports out on, in terms of student SAT performance, which is now the state marker for our high school students, we kind of compare ourselves in what we call a DIRG. It's a reference group. So it's a listing of comparable districts. So there's 19 to 20 districts in that DIRG. And in the SAT scores, we were top in the DIRG in English language arts, and we were second in math. Now there's still room for improvement there. When you look at the overall performance of where statewide students are in that math area, the SAT, there's definitely room for growth, and we're working on that with preparedness with our kids and our staff. But from a comparative standpoint, in those two measures, we look solid, and in science, we were number 2 in the entire state. So something to be proud of there.
Pretty good return on investment.
Not bad. Our high school, Simsbury High School, great new principal there in her second year. Maggie Seidel has people excited about the direction that the high school is going in. News and World Report came out this year, and I think we were 7th in that. That fluctuates a little bit over time, up and down, but I know that's a marker that some community members are familiar with as well. In our elementary, performance has been solid. I mean, varies grade to grade, but when you it's called the ESPA test. You roll that achievement measure up, and the grades that take it 3 through 6 were either 2 or 3 in that kind of ranking of performance in the 21 towns. So always room to work, but solid performance by our kids.
Excellent. Yeah, and I think I told you before we came on the air that my oldest grandson's now first grader at Squadron Line.
Excellent.
So where his mother and uncle and aunt went.
Great.
So that's great. From a high school standpoint, there's the capstone project, or requirement, I guess it is.
Right.
And, some people aren't aware of that, but that seems to be a pretty good, innovative approach to get students involved. And tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, really an initiative that aligns with what we call our vision of the graduate competencies. So we have 6 competencies, basically skills outside of hardcore academia skills, but things like global citizenship, critical thinking, collaboration, that we believe that, to prepare our kids for either a secondary education or the workplace, you really have to thrive and have experiences in these skills. So the capstone program, which was a requirement of the state, and now they've kind of backed off it, but our board has valued it and wants to continue on with the practice, is a way to demonstrate kind of those competencies as you graduate from high school. So we have different pathways for kids to get there. We have courses, elective courses that are aligned with maybe an interest area like engineering. If a student has a passion project, they can present that for approval in the capstone, or we have internship opportunities.
We've had interns actually in the studio for Simsbury Community Media.
So I think it's an opportunity to find a niche for kids, which is great. And in a busy high school schedule, you don't always have that opportunity. And it culminates with a pretty large presentation in front of your peers, in front of staff. Parents come, kind of a celebration of sorts where you present your findings in a research-based model. And it's a great experience to prepare kids for the next level, because that's what you're going to be doing in the workforce, and that's what you're going to be doing in college.
It's unfortunate the state backed off of that.
Yeah. Well, I think the state, and we do all have challenges a little bit of that sweet spot of giving kids opportunity for choice, yet meeting all the requirements and kind of mandates that continue to come down. So I think the state was looking to create more flexibility for places, but in terms of synergy of skills and getting kids engaged, I think it's a really beneficial avenue for us to have.
Good. Well, one other thing, let's talk a little bit about something that I think has been of interest to a lot of people, and also from a social standpoint, is the use of cell phones in schools. A lot in the media about that and how it's been distracting. And I know some school systems have taken them out totally, all the way down to the elementary level. And Simsbury has taken some steps as well. And I'd be interested to hear more about what Simsbury is doing in that regard.
I mean, really, an interesting evolution of the challenge, right? We spent a lot of time during COVID, transitioning back from COVID, strategically trying to figure out how to keep people apart from each other.
Yeah.
You know?
Right.
Now we bring them back together, and some of those habits and the use of the cell phone and people being engaged with those phones really started to cause challenges in schools. Yeah. So we did at both the middle level and the high school level with Scott Baker, really great principal over at the middle school, and Maggie Seidel and her administrative team really wanted to revisit how we're handling that because it was just becoming a source of tension, right? Yeah. Kids have phones out all the time. Do I really want to take that on and get into an interaction about it or not? So we just reestablished different norms. You know, Henry James always had a policy, had gotten a little loose on it. So Scott spent some time over the summer really communicating with families and with kids how we were going to manage this in terms of those phones are off and away during the day. And if you need access to a parent or there's an emergency, we will help you and support you with that. High school, much more consistent approach to in the classroom. Those phones are off and away or in a phone tree. They're not with you. And maybe most importantly, it may seem like a small thing. If you have to go out during class to a restroom or to visit somebody else, you do not take the phone with you. Right. So
I bet it fosters a lot more interaction among the students, both at either lunchtime or in the hall or collaboration, and they probably find it, wow, I can actually talk to somebody about something. I don't have to be doing it on the phone.
And we've had a little bit of pushback, to be honest, Paul, not a lot. You know, and parents, you know, I've gotten notes from parents about how supportive they are of it. Yeah. And I think, you know, just talking to the middle school principal the other day, dealing with it much less during the day because phones aren't out.
Right.
Therefore, there's not as much as those kids to deal with from the social standpoint when they get home. Right. Not as much for administration to follow up on. We were finding that a lot of what our administrators were sorting through from kind of a behavioral standpoint were online interactions that were happening outside of school, but the impact was coming into school. Yeah. And this is starting to help with that. It's a step. It's not taking the care altogether, but I mean, early indications are that people are very supportive of it.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I think you'll see that in a year, 2 years as everything goes along. And you'll probably even see like capstone, some of the capstone projects become better, and the students will become more articulate in what they're doing because they have to do a little bit more research
with each other.
Instead of just that's great. And Simsbury's also had some really good success last year in sports. I know that's dear to your heart.
Yeah.
You know, playing basketball at
sure.
UHA, but so we had a couple of state championships. Why don't you go over that?
Yeah, we really had, you know, last school year kind of a banner year for us. You know, we're known in Simsbury, I think, for the comprehensive nature of the athletic program in terms of offerings, not necessarily the number of state championships we've won. Right. I think that's fair to say. We have a lot of different activities for kids to participate in, and we have a huge participation rate, which is great. But we had, it started last year in the fall with our girls soccer team that won a state championship, followed up by our girls basketball team winning the state championship at Mohegan Sun, and just an incredible game and environment.
Yeah, that was awesome. I went to a number of the games. Yeah.
And then our boys volleyball team, a kind of a storied, undefeated season with a bunch of seniors that really came together to win a state championship. And then girls rugby as well. And we almost won a fifth with the girls lacrosse team in an exciting game that we lost down the stretch there. But
that was just a couple of days ago, I think, right?
Yeah, it brings a lot of energy to the community. It brings a lot of, obviously, you know, joy and passion to what the kids' experiences are. So
awesome. Well, hey Matt, I've been asking a lot of topics or going over a lot of topics and things like that. Tell me, are there things that I've missed that you think are very important that our audience would like to know from a school standpoint?
Yeah, I think, I'll just say this, in the spirit of gratitude, honestly, that I know our administrative team, our Board of Ed, our teachers feel very fortunate to practice their craft and have their careers in Simsbury. It is a community where, I said this, it's kind of my mantra coming in, right? You have kids that are really prepared and motivated. You have parents that are educated and involved and really supportive. And you have the local boards that want to see that education system continue to thrive. Paul, I had a neat experience a couple weeks ago. I got a call out of nowhere from a gentleman over at Powder Forest. And he asked me to just come over. They're doing something similar to what you are. They're doing a monthly speaker and come over and do a presentation to the larger community over there. Powder Forest is a retirement community.
Yeah, right.
Had a great turnout. Must have had 30 people there.
Really?
Questions about the budget and the dollars and where they go. But by and large, individuals who had kids go through the school system wanted to make sure that the school system was still in good standing, that we still cared about things like the arts, school safety, some of the topics you hit. And I just left there saying, you really have a community that may have challenges at different times, but really values education.
Yeah.
And that's a good recipe for success.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's awesome. That's
Yeah.
great. Great. Well, wrapping it up, Matt, I just wanted to say thank you for being with us today. It's really been a good experience, a lot of interesting topics. And also for our audience, I want to thank our audience for tuning in to Simsbury Community Media and watching these interviews, because I think they're very important from a community standpoint, and that's what Simsbury Community Media is all about, is providing the opportunity for our audience to see what's going on in town, and not only from the standpoint of education, government, but and civics, but also from the standpoint of the arts that we provide. And we appreciate you tuning in to Simsbury Community Media.
For over 40 years, SCM has been the voice of our town,
bringing us together through
local programming,
Education.
and live broadcasts.
SEM isn't just about television.
It's about empowering our community,
Ensuring our voices are heard during government meetings.
and celebrating milestones.
like our high school graduations.
But today, SEM faces a challenge.
Our funding structure is based on television subscriptions.
And it's no secret, people have been cutting the cord.
With a shift to internet-only subscriptions,
SCM receives less revenue.
Even though all our programming is freely available online.
We need your support.
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 Your donation can make a difference.
It will ensure that SCM remains open.
continues to educate our youth.
And keeps our community informed.
Thanks to SCM, I've been honing my creative skills, helping me work towards my college degree.
SCM is crucial for keeping our community connected.
SCM isn't just here to broadcast local events. They're actually preserving Simsbury's history.
Join us.
Join us in preserving Simsbury's voice.
Simsbury's voice.
Together we can ensure that SCM continues to thrive.
For generations to come.
Visit our website
Or scan the QR code on your screen to make your donation.
Every
Contribution.
Counts.
Thank you for supporting Simsbury Community Media.
Where your town
Your schools and
And your government
come together.